Today, we are going to embark on the intersection of medical coding and AI. So, you might be wondering what's all this buzz going on about AI? How is this going to relate to medical coding? How are we going to work it? Is this going to medical coders? Well, my friends, imagine a world where complex medical data can be swiftly and accurately translated into our code sets. It's going to be seamless communication. Everything's going to work well. Uh, Wonderful synergy between the doctor, the biller, the insurance company, researchers, and algorithms that can just process all of this information for us. But then also remember how long it took the USA versus the rest of the world to adopt ICD-10-CM, and also remember that in the healthcare field, we are still heavily relying on technologies such as the fax machine. So, in this live stream today, going to take a step back from my usual AMA sort of format to talk about AI and medical coding, where we are, where we're going to be going. But just remember, this is not a one-way street. This is not just Victoria talking at you. I want to hear from you as well. So during the live stream, you can participate by asking questions. You can share your thoughts. You can engage very respectfully, in the comment section. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with today's live stream. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in this Friday. As a gentle reminder, our live stream is sponsored by Preppy. You can find out more about Preppy if you're looking for a medical billing and coding training program at medicalcodingmasterclass.com. Thank you, Preppy, for sponsoring today's live stream. So, before we get into the chat about AI and about medical coding, what's going on there, some of you may have noticed already. I'm going to love you if you say you haven't, but I'm not wearing eye makeup today. I still have 1 week to go after my LASIK surgery last week before I am allowed to wear mascara and eyeliner again. So I'm feeling a little bit naked. I was close. I almost was about ready to interface another program to overlay makeup on me, but I was afraid I would burn out my computer. So we aren't doing that. But for anyone who's interested, last week's LASIK surgery, phenomenal. Um, I went in, I was in the procedure room for maybe 10 minutes. It took 3 minutes for them to laser each of my eyes. It was a super weird procedure because you're, like, looking at this flashing green light, and then you lose your vision, and then it comes back. But it took, like, almost no time and was completely painless. So it was very worth a while. Now when I'm outside, like, in the Pennsylvania hills and so forth, I can see, like, as far as, like, the texture on all of the trees and stuff, so it's yeah, different. But yeah, John, I do have glasses. I wanna, like, take the lenses out. I wish I could take the lenses out of my old ones because I like the pattern so much, um, and turn them into blue light glasses. I do have, like, blue light glasses, but these are not as cute as my old glasses. So, today, let's get into the live stream. Why I wanted to talk about this a little bit today, as we have 82 people coming into the live stream. So, uh, over the past few weeks, I've had issues with a handful of trolls having to get banned from the channel because they have been coming in and making comments on, like, my most recent videos or some of my older videos, and making comments such as, "Has AI not taken over this job yet? I can't wait for AI to take over your job." Um, you know, AI is gonna come and take your job, you're gonna not have a job, get ready to not have a job. There was one in there that very recently that said, "Lol, you'll all be replaced in 6 months, adios." So, you gotta love the internet trolls. I think some people are very taken aback by that because they think like, "Oh, well, people shouldn't act like that, AAPC members." No, we're not talking about AAPC members, we're talking about just internet trolls, coming in and, saying commentary about how AI is gonna take over medical coding. Um, and I don't want this to get to the point where they're going to discourage people from getting into this field because trolls are coming in and saying, "Hey, don't bother, medical coding is gonna be gone." But I also do have a fair amount of people that that's a concern for. They're like, "Hey, I don't wanna start a training program and then find out that the job's gonna be wiped out in a short amount of time," right? Then that's a valid concern for people to have. Like, that is something you should be asking. So let's talk about this a little bit. Are we gonna be replaced in 6 months? Adios. So let's talk first uh, about where we started. So this was my very first computer. This was the TI-99. So my dad, um, used to work for Air Products, and oftentimes when they were updating things, computers, chairs, whatever, they would let the employees take whatever was left over, and I wound up in the '80s getting this home computer from my dad working at Air Products, and I thought this was the coolest thing. There was little cartridge games you could put in it, and, um, little Victoria, who could barely read, found this little manual for the computer, right? It had beginner's basic, and there were instructions on how to program this computer, how you could program it for different games. So I could barely read, but I was able to open up this computer and follow the steps to program the computer to put in a number guessing game. So it would play this game with me and the computer, and I would tell it would tell me to, pick a number and we would guess the number. And of course, as time went on, the use of technology that I've been working with has evolved. In my maybe middle school, high school era, we're talking dialing up to local bulletin board systems to play games in ASCII graphics. As a teen, it was, dude, we're getting Adele, and the AOL chat rooms happened, and then Napster and MIRC and ICQ and torrents and all of that good stuff. MySpace, something I got into trouble too back in the day. Um, and, originally I actually went to college for web design. That was what I went to school for because I taught myself how to code in HTML at the age of 13. Of course, ultimately, I went up back to community college through the career programs at Reading Community and became a graduate of their billing certificate program, and then became a CPC, and kind of the rest is history there. So this is Victoria in her very first healthcare job. I was in my 20s, and it was my first job with dual monitors, which I thought was like the coolest thing I had ever seen. That's having a computer that had two monitors on it. And if you look there in the very background of the screen on the right, you can see centricity practice management. That was the first system I used back in the day. um, and I worked in charge entry, so my one monitor just had scanned super bills on it, and then centricity practice management you can see there on the other, and I just typed in whatever was on those super bills all day long. And the interesting thing about this era was this was not too far into the surge of PowerPoint, right? So PowerPoint really gained momentum in business around this time, and everyone thought they were like super cool and super techy because they could make these slides and have them present at the revenue cycle meeting where like the text would fly in and it would make this race car sound, or the text would, bump in and it would make this cash register noise. And they thought, that was just so, they were just so high tech, so cool. And there was a lot of novelty use of that PowerPoint application. We were just doing the race cars, the cash registers, boom, things flying in. And I feel like that's where we're at right now with some of our applications with things like ChatGPT, right? So there's this novelty use of ChatGPT that we're seeing right now. It's a lot of people that are going, ChatGPT, write me a poem about blah, 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 blah. ChatGPT. Uh-oh. I asked ChatGPT, insert whatever your industry question thing is here, you know? I asked ChatGPT if medical coders were going to be replaced by AI, and it said no, blah, um, it's funny because I've also seen now the surgence of people using ChatGPT to create LinkedIn posts. And I've been around the block with this tech enough that I can tell who's just doing things like asking AI, how do I find a job in medical coding? And then like copy and pasting that as a blog post. So, anyway, back to Victoria in her lovely youth. Now, in this era of Victoria, this was also the Great Recession. So, for my organization, that meant there were huge layoffs. First, they offered a voluntary leave package. They're like, hey, we're going to have to get rid of people anyway. If you want to volunteer to leave, we'll pay for your unemployment, we'll pay for your health care for X amount of months. And what happened was nearly my entire department took advantage of that. So they decided, yeah, like I'll kick back and get paid unemployment and you pay for my health care and I'll spend time with my kids. I'll go on vacation. A lot of them went back to school for like nursing. And I wound up having to, had to basically restock the department for a lot of the billing services because people left and those were like positions they actually needed to fill. So I don't know how that actually saved them any money. But in any case, um, that is what happened in my organization. What happened in other organizations was they looked at they could save money. Like they're looking at this and going, okay, um, who is not, who can we get rid of that's not directly impacting patient care and is not making us money? And they went, oh, what about all these health information people, all these medical coders? We'll just go ahead and get rid of them. So they sent them out the door and, you know, did not work out very well. After a while, the revenue, they noticed it started plummeting. Denial started going up out of the chimneys, just blowing up all over the place. And once they realized that, yeah, they were losing money, they either brought people back or they went, oh, you know what, let's outsource it maybe to a different company. Let's talk a minute about outsourcing, to another vendor. So when the hospital outsources, that's different than offshoring. Okay, first off, outsourcing doesn't technically eliminate jobs as much as it moves the seat. There's still someone that's going to have to code those charts. They just might not be located in the hospital. That seat for that position it now exists in an outside vendor or an outside billing company. So it's not that the job is gone, no one's doing it. The seat has moved somewhere else. That's not necessarily the same as offshoring. Offshoring is when we take that seat and we move it outside of the country. So we move it over to Pakistan or the Philippines or Egypt or somewhere. So it's outsourced. And typically they do that for cost savings because they don't have to pay those employees as much as we would have to domestic coders. So, yeah, let me ask you guys some questions. When we think about AI, are you more excited about this technology or are you more intimidated by AI? Are you fearful? And I think there are some valid fearful concerns. I mean, from what I understand, just kind of looking at the news that passes by my standard feed, uh, the gentleman involved with developing ChatGPT is like, "Yo, we we need some regulations around this." But I'm curious what you guys think as far as like, are we excited? Are we like, this is gonna like mind blowing? This is gonna save me some time. I'm gonna be able to focus more on the type of work I actually want to get into. or we're like, "Oh, this is intimidating. I'm, kinda scared." Yeah. So I've seen some people saying they're excited, mixed feelings, a little fearful, a little excited, concerned. Yeah. I think there's a lot of considerations. I think the technology is moving very fast, and I definitely agree with, um, and not speaking necessarily about even medical coding, but just in generalities, uh, regulating the deep fakes, regulating, how do we identify what was authentic versus what was computer generated. Apple, it sounds like, is now developing some sort of technology where they can kind of duplicate your voice. And some of those technologies, outside of Apple, have existed for a while, and it's a little scary. And I would agree that we do need some regulation of as far as identifying like what is authentic and what is someone, being deep faked or not a genuine development, right? um, so I think historically, based off of what I've experienced, one of the valid concerns that we're gonna see with AI is, are we gonna see a repeat then of what happened during the Great Recession, where we are going to see companies and they're going to go, oh, you know what? We'll just plug in the AI, get rid of the coders. But we've seen that that does not work out. And I'm sure there will be some pockets of healthcare organizations where they try to do just that. They just say, hey, you know what? We've got this great new program with all these algorithms. We're just going to have the providers do this, and it'll bill and it'll go out the door and it'll be amazing. So I don't doubt that there are gonna be some people that are going to attempt to do that, but I don't foresee it ending up terribly well. 110 people on the stream today. Excuse me 1 second. Um, so just a little bit of a history of what's happened here. Let me get my pen out. So 2020, I'm sorry, 2018, if we look at the timeline here, is when OpenAI was founded, and that's the software that ChatGPT and a lot of these AI programs are based off of. Basically, it's like a program that went out, read the entire internet, and now it can kind of act in a almost human-like fashion, right? 2019 ChatGPT 2, or well, GPT-2 was introduced, and that started being able to produce that human-like text. In 2020, they developed GPT-3, and that was allowed they allowed developers to kind of tap into that and use it to integrate into applications, into their own services. 2021 was when ChatGPT was released, and it allowed users to have those dynamic conversations with the language model. It wasn't as available as it is now, because 2023 is really kind of when it became the sensation, when they started using it, to have the subscription-based services and so forth. Um, about here on the timeline, right around here, is when Victoria started using cool AI programs. So remember how I talked about how I've been using computers, Texas Instruments one's programming and stuff for a long time? Yeah, I'm kind of ahead of the curve on things. I like this quote though. It says, "AI will not replace you, a person using AI will." And I have a confession. I have been using AI to help me out with some of my content creation for about a year and a half before the surge of ChatGPT even hit. Not using AI to completely create it, but to enhance certain things. For example, pretty much every article that I wrote last year that was published in Healthcare Business Monthly had some sort of touch from AI. Not written by AI, I wrote them, but enhanced in some way. Either I said, hey, I have various templates, content creation templates, and I would put in something and say, "Hey, I'm writing an article on how to engage members in a career-oriented society." Um, and it would say, "Oh, yeah, here's some bullets of things you should cover in this article." Boom, 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 and I'd look at it and go, "Oh, yeah, I was gonna cover that, that, that. Oh, oof, forgot about that one. Yeah, that's a good idea. I better make sure that I cover that one." Or I'd be writing the article and I'd go, "You know what? Oh, I know the words I wanna say, but not in, like, an exciting way." So I would run it through to rewrite it, and I'd tell it the tone, and it would kind of spit out something. I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I just let me tweak this a little bit. That looks better now." So again, not written by AI, but touched by, enhanced by some fashion. Um, the thumbnail of this live stream was tweaked a little bit by AI. So there's AI embedded now in Canva, and I didn't want my shirt that I was wearing to look just like the shirt I had in the video that I posted yesterday. So I ran it through AI and said, "Hey, can you replace the picture on my t-shirt with just like a black pattern so it doesn't look like the same thing?" Um, so now as far as our medical coding applications, we've had computer assisted coding for a long time, and we need it. We need it. It helps us improve our efficiency. It helps make us better coders. It helps put those references right at our fingertips. Now, there's applications in Epic that have been there for a long time that can read a note and give coding suggestions. Back when I was working in Lancaster, there was an application. I don't know if this is what it was officially called, but we used to call it the Wizard. And we would turn on this application, the Wizard, and it would kind of read through the note and go, "Here's the E&M code that it should be." But what we found out was the Wizard was not as accurate as we had probably wanted it to be. Was it a good tool? Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I'm sure. And for some doctors, they probably wanted to keep it on so they could prompt them or help them in some way. But, coding isn't just a one to one translation service. There's a lot of nuance involved in medical coding, a lot of and ors, or, this word, if it said something else, would code to this. And it's a lot of nuance. And without having skilled coders, there's no way to tell if what is being outputted by AI is of any quality, right? Like, we can't just assume that everything that's coming out of there is correct. It's that old adage of like garbage in, garbage out. There needs to be a human element. Just like the physicians making documentation, we can't just, have AI watch the service being done and document it or completely rely on templates. Yes, if you ask AI, like, can you make a progress note for a patient that does blah, 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 blah? Yeah, it can spit something out. Um, but we still need that human verification. We still need the physician to verify it, to modify it, to approve it in some way. Um, what I think that's going to mean for medical coders is that we're going to have to be more skilled, right? Those simpler tasks of, oh, like we used to learn back in the day. Oh, here's my code book, and I just look this up in the code book, and this, and I am the best coder in the world because I found that code. Those are going to be more more automated. There's going to be a lot more automatic code selection. It's going to be then up to the coder to work in more of a quality assurance, more of an auditing role, verifying these sort of things. So those simple lookup tasks aren't going to be integrated, aren't going to be what medical coding jobs are. What we did 20 years ago is not going to be what we're going to be doing in 5 years. It's going to be more towards auditing, more towards research, more towards clinical understanding, more towards seeing things in the documentation that aren't there or aren't represented correctly. So there's going to be this need for broader, for more sophisticated, more depth of understanding in medical coding. And um, as a result, I think we're going to have more employers trying to weed out the coders that had a solid education and a solid foundation versus the coders that went through, these 3 or 4 day televangelist style boot camps where it's, a stadium of 40 coders that they're going to puke out in a matter of days that basically were trained how to take the CPC exam, and that's the extent of their education, passing that exam. We're going to see, I think, a lot more employers wanting to filter through who is the genuine deal, who can really have that critical thinking, that analytical skill, and versus the people who, kind of, I don't want to say shortcutted their way through it, but don't have that breadth of understanding that others might. So, what are our limitations? I want to actually stop a minute and take a look at some of the things going on in the chat. I've got too many windows going on here. Um, Chris is saying, I can see a future with AI programs developed by CMS. Ooh, yeah, could be scary. Could be scary. Um, I'm thinking if the AI is intensive Boolean logic, if then statements, it will take years to build out. Yeah, yeah, we're gonna need coders for the foreseeable future. Yeah, and even so, we'll talk about how coding is gonna kind of adapt. Um, Yeah, and this is one of the things I wanna talk about too, is I can't imagine the idea of AI working because software programs need constant updating. IT people who understand medical coding and billing and run fix things. Yeah, I mean, without someone behind it that understands how to make it work, it's not gonna be a very good program, right? Yeah. Love it, love it. I'm noticing a small absence in my audience today from my routine friends because everyone is traveling right now onto HealthCon. And lucky for those of you that are going. I just did not want to squeeze that in today. I looked at it and I'm like, you know what? I feel like I'd rather spend $3,000 on vacation than HealthCon. I might make it out to regionals this year. But yeah, so let's talk about some of our limitations that we have here. We have, you know, AI, I think, is very well needed in healthcare, but again, healthcare tends to be slow moving. And in medical coding, there's limitations to how we're going to be able to use it, right? We're not going to be able to use it just to do anything and everything. So, some of our key limitations, the complexity of medical coding. So, translating these medical procedures, these diagnoses, and considering the guidelines, the insurance differences, the context again of how one thing can change that code selection, I think it's going to be great to have AI assisting us and automating some of that process, but the complexity and the nuances of medical coding do make it challenging to completely automate the process, right? And I've said in the past, I know I didn't I might be I know, Matthew, I'm sorry. I might make it out to regionals. I might make it out to regionals. We'll see. I have I'm figuring some things out. Um, but as far as the complexity in medical coding, I equate it sometimes to things like accounting, right? So, QuickBooks, you can use QuickBooks to do like a simple tax return, right? If you're someone who is a W 2 employee and you've just got W 2 income and you're like, hey, there's low risk that I'm gonna get audited even if I do, like, this is it. All I've got is this W-2. You might be fine with just filing your taxes yourself or just going into QuickBooks and saying, "Hey, here's my W-2," scan it in, and it just processes everything, figures out if you have a refund, whatever. But if you're someone who's like me and you're running a business and you don't know all of the ins and outs and tax regulations, I don't want to go through QuickBooks. I hire an accountant because they're the one that has that mastery level understanding of all of the different regulations, what has to get categorized where, when everything has to get filed. But my accountant uses QuickBooks because QuickBooks helps organize things. It helps automate some of those processes for her. It doesn't replace my accountant because I don't want to take that risk of it replacing my accountant. Um, it's a QuickBooks is a tool. I would not trust an AI program to have access to my bank account, read through all my transactions, assume what things are, categorize it, pull money out of my account and send it over to the IRS, right? Um, I want my skilled accountant to look at it. And if I get audited, who's not showing up in court? The AI program. My accountant will help defend me in an audit. An AI program isn't going to. I'm just a small business. Think about a healthcare organization that has billions and billions and billions of dollars on the line. Are we really going to trust AI programs to just blip, 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 filter through everything? Or are we, like I feel like my business, going to want some eyeballs on that, right? Um, Because, in the event of an audit, the physicians can't kick back and go, I don't know, AI program. That's just the way it built it. They're at fault, not me. No, that's not how it works. Going out the door with physician's name on it, it's the physician's liability. Matrix. Um, and of course, the need for source data. Um, some of these programs, they're using data that's based off of no sooner than 2 years ago, and we have a lot of code changes that have happened in the past couple of years, right? Um, the AI models, they rely very heavily on the data that they're fed. They need high quality training data. They, need source information, and there is such a wide variety of coding scenarios that they could possibly encounter. I always think even things like, oh my God, lesion removals, depending on if it's benign or malignant, or what the size is, or what the margins are, or if they forgot the margins, or if they didn't include the size, or they just want you to go by the pathology report, which you shouldn't do, or the depth of it. And what if they didn't document the depth? Well, then things might be going out as skin lesions that were really subcutaneous or musculoskeletal type of lesion excisions. You know, yeah, I think I completely agree with that. It's like self-driving cars. They can do impressive things, but also fail spectacularly. So you have to keep your hands on the wheel, at least for now. If we get to a point where I don't have to do anything but like make jewelry and sell it anymore, like online, like I'll be fine with that. Um, Coding guidelines evolve a lot, right? We're constantly getting new regulate. Oh my God, Cigna the 25 modifier. That's coming up. Constantly getting new guidelines, evolving medicine, evolving healthcare practices, changes, revocations of coverage determinations, new codes, new technologies, more specificities. And, AI would need to stay up to date with all of these standards, which means that it constantly has to be monitored. We constantly have to be updating it. It has to be fed that new material. We have to verify that then what it's outputting is correct because we know how failure to comply to all these guidelines, again, we can't just go, hey, I messed it up. Sorry, sorry. We know we apparently accepted, hundreds of thousands of dollars that weren't really entitled to, but that robot over there is the one who really is responsible. Doesn't work that way. Um, Interpretation of clinical documentation. So, when we're reading medical records, we have to do some level of clinical understanding. We have to not make clinical inference, but be able to identify and again see some of the things that maybe aren't there or weren't correctly documented. Um, and those are some intricate details. There's a lot of different context of these documents. Um, and I think I watched a video not too long ago, even with Dr. Mike, uh, and he was talking about, let me see if ChatGPT is going to give correct medical information. And there's a lot of basic stuff that it does. It does say very correctly. And other things, when you're talking about more complex patients, long histories, there's still that need for that human analyzation. Legal and ethical concerns, that ew, we as medical coders pride ourselves in patient privacy, right? We know that if we're seeing protected information, we don't go and blather that all over the place. Um, there is some delicacy with privacy regulations and having so many algorithms and so many modules and so much software and applications having access to all of that patient data, right? Um, and how we're going to handle the security measures of making sure that the AI isn't reading documents and storing the data and then developing other content based off of information that it read in someone's personal medical record, right? How do we maintain those ethical guidelines, the patient confidentiality, the data protection? We have breaches as it is, and I think the more we're allowing access to that information to have like automatic records generated and read, that opens some new considerations, certainly with data protection. And of course, human expertise and judgment. Medical coding requires that just expertise, the judgment, knowing how to critically think through ambiguous cases. Is this something that I'm going to query the physician on? Is this something that, we should just code it as the documentation currently is? Is there something that is complex about this that would be better documented a certain way? How do we educate the provider on that? So while AI models can be helpful in automating some of the tasks, they don't have that critical judgment, that critical thinking skill, that human experience to know certain tasks. Um, AI can assist. It can certainly improve our processes. It can give us some efficiency and help us potentially maybe reduce some errors. Um, but I think we still need a lot of human oversight and validation to remain critical and ensure that we're accurately coding, that we have the consistency in maintaining the guidelines and in our regulations. So, um, AI can assist in a lot of automation. It can certainly help us speed up some of our coding tasks, but we still need that human touch. That's still very critical, very important um, in our coding realm. Just give me 1 second. So, funny thing, AI actually, let me ban this person. AI actually generated this picture. I asked it to generate a picture of a robot defending a doctor in court, and this is what it came up with. So it's a robot doctor as well. Um, I did not draw that. This was an AI generated. So yeah, I think I'm excited. I think there's a lot of things that this will help improve efficiencies for, but I think it's just going to be a lot more for coders to understand, a lot more for coders to learn, to adapt. We're going to have to be probably quicker on our feet. We're going to have to be a lot more analytical of some of the things that we're reading and probably move more towards that more auditing, more compliance role, which we've said for years. I am very interested to hear, though, what will be said about this by Bevan Erickson. So, um, this Sunday is the start, I believe, of HealthCon, and Bevan Erickson, the president of the AAPC, will be speaking um, on his like state of the AAPC address. So I think he will probably touch on AI and hopefully touch on some of the things going on with the exam centers as well. They are live streaming that on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, definitely check out the AAPC's Facebook page and group because they're going to be uh, doing some streaming of the HealthCon there, and that keynote speech is one of it. I'm very excited to hear the state of the AAPC address. That's my favorite part, honestly. Um, so, any other questions, concerns, comments? We still have 109 people in the live stream right now, popping in and out. I'm just gonna go scroll back up to some of the comments here. Um, I was working a project, oh gosh, it might even be 2 years ago now, where they were developing things, tools to help, AI and medical coding. I know Stacy Buck has worked with a lot of stuff in Rad Onc. And yeah, like the programs are out there, they're being developed. I'm sure there's lots of companies working on them. If anyone is out there right now that is working for a company that has developed AI and you kind of want to come on and show what your software does, I'm 100% open to that. Um, yeah, and this is interesting. So if you saw, I posted something on LinkedIn, I posted I think some Instagram and TikToks about this as well. So they're supposedly, according to the AMA, they said that there is a 30% shortage in coders. So I think AI can help and should help the existing coders more because apparently there's a shortage. And medical coding is so complex. There's so much consumption of healthcare anymore, right? And I think the level of healthcare versus the amount of coders we have and the different things we have to look at, like we need these efficiencies. We need programs to help us out with this because there is just a volume that we're struggling to keep up with. Now, the interesting thing about this supposed shortage is this was based off of an article that the AMA published, and they said that there is a shortage based off of several studies based nationwide, but then they did not cite the sources of these studies. I have looked around, I've not seen any studies of there being a coder shortage across the nation other than being referenced in this article by the AMA. So I have a healthy amount of skepticism in regards to this article because of not referencing these sources of these several studies showing that there is a shortage of medical coders. And I want to see this source material of where are these studies? What studies where is saying that there's a shortage of medical coders? Because that seems a little sus to me. There are many rules and concepts within most coding cases. In addition, medical documentation, E&M reports, op reports, etc., come from humans. Yeah, although those are starting to come from AI too, which is a little scary. Um, Things are written in so many ways to describe a given scenario, and when you mix these two things, the AI has a hard time to run through all of that. Has to cover the little differences, try to automate it. Yeah, the other thing I'd like to say is, we have like again, this wonderful picture that I had AI generate for me. AI can make pictures. Am I going to print out a picture that AI did and hang it from my mantle place? No. Am I going to want AI to take family portraits for me? Probably not. Do I want them to generate family? Oh, like I want real photographs. I want real artwork. There's a time and a place for what it's producing. Uh, AI, Amazon apparently is having quite the problem right now because people are having AI generate books and they're flooding their self-publishing systems right now because there's just garbage being published into to self-published books to make money, and people are buying them possibly, a little bit here and there, and they're just horrible. AI is not writing the New York Times bestseller. A human is. As someone who is in the process of taking their CPC certification exam next month, do you feel that this new technology will interfere with entry-level coders? I really don't. This technology has existed in medical coding in some degree for as long as I have been in medical coding. I think now we're going to have to see a lot more sophisticated training, though, in medical coding, where we used to output a lot of coders who didn't know things like the difference between Part B and Part D, or didn't know a local coverage determination, or what the Federal Register is. We're going to have more coders that are able to hit the ground running, understanding some of those more nuanced policies, where in the past, they could have just a basic knowledge of coding. I remember, oh my God, 10 years ago when before it was Healthcare Business Monthly, I think it was called The Coding Edge was the AAPC's magazine, and I had one of the coders in my department complaining, "Oh, this used to just be about coding, and now it's not just about coding. I only wanna know about coding. I don't wanna know about compliance. I don't wanna know about business. I don't wanna know about revenue set." And the people that were reluctant to learn these other aspects, to have a baseline understanding of how the revenue cycle works, the people that didn't wanna have the baseline understanding of compliance, they're the ones that fell behind, that had trouble finding new jobs. The people that were more willing to dive into understanding a more holistic picture of what's going on in healthcare are the ones who really did rise and have more successful careers, that didn't want to just do coding. As much as I mean, I would like to just do coding too, but I do have to know a little bit of other components. Yeah, I'm curious to see how AI is gonna do the excludes twos and excludes ones, because that still, I think, to me is wacky. One's like sometimes maybe and the other is maybe sometimes. How do I think AI will affect wages for medical billing and coding representatives? It's an interesting question. Um, it really depends. I think it's gonna depend so much on the organization itself because, um, we see the regional differences, we see the job type differences. Um, I think considering this is going to become more sophisticated, I would see salaries staying either the same or rising, but they're going to become stricter about filtering out the people who have the skills that are needed to work with these tools, to have the understanding to verify the quality of what's being put out, and are worthy of the higher wages. Because we don't want to hire someone again that went through, super awesome medical coding school, girl boss academy, and only learned how to pass the exam and doesn't actually know how to analyze medical records in the way that they would need to. Yeah. Yeah, bottom line, we're still gonna need to continue to use coders. It is the same way that we still need accountants, even though QuickBooks could just read through my bank account and be like, "Here you go, IRS, take my tax money." Hmm. Alright. So anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Um, I don't usually do the long presentations, but, I'm glad that it went well, and, now I have some content to direct people to when they just tell me that medical coding is just going to be eliminated in the next few years. Thank you again to all of the trolls. Enjoy your ban from the channel. Um, this is a great question from Karen Stokes. Will there be more demand for nurse coders? I think probably in a lot of aspects, especially since we are seeing a surge in clinical documentation improvement, which has historically been such an inpatient thing and now is really, in addition, moving to outpatient and provider based billing. So I think, yeah, there's going to be a more need for nurse coders, but not necessarily that everyone's going to have to be. We did see a trend for a while in CDI where they literally were only hiring RNs. And it was to the point that I was even advising people, like, don't bother getting your CDI certification unless you have an RN because no one's going to take you. And thanks to people like Brian Quee out there who are fighting back and saying, hey, just because I haven't clinically performed these procedures doesn't mean that I don't understand how they're done. That doesn't mean I don't have the clinical understanding, even though I maybe don't have the hands on clinical experience. I know what this is. I know what this means. And we saw that kind of draw back a little bit, where now they're saying, okay, well, as long as you can demonstrate this sort of proficiency or you have X years experience in healthcare, you can work as a CDI, even though you don't have a clinical credential like an LPN or an RN. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a, a benefit to billers and coders having more, again, holistic understanding more of the clinical concepts, which I'll admit I myself need to work on. I don't know exactly how I work on that. I guess I could just start like buying NCLEX materials from nurses and going through it. Yeah. Um, but that's one area where I think I myself need to improve, and that's a tough thing because, we don't need to put catheters in patients, right? But we need to understand functionally kinda how some of those things work in order to make more analytical decisions, right? It's in order to have, uh, that knowledge that we're gonna need to be successful and accurate and not lose money and better aid physicians and, make sure that patients' bills are getting properly coded and billed and paid for in the future. I did wanna point out here because I can't believe no one said anything. How did no one okay, I'm gonna point this out, and you're all gonna go, "I wanted to say something, but I didn't." Does no one notice that Doodle Bob is hanging out in the back of my shelf? Do you not how much do you guys love Doodle Bob? I stole this from my daughter. She used to be really into SpongeBob, and I got her, like, a SpongeBob quarterly delivery package, and then she lost interest in them, and I found him, and I decided that Doodle Bob needed a spot right here on my shelf next to my next to my silver play button. Ah, see, Joylyn says she saw him. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. This was a great conversation, and I want to especially say thank you for everyone being so respectful in the comments. If you have uh, other concerns, definitely let them know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And for those of you watching on the replay, definitely let me know your thoughts about AI and medical coding if you're excited, if you're fearful, what kind of concerns you have in the comments. I will see you guys back next Friday for another live stream. But until then, you guys, you can just go ahead and keep on coding on.